Oh my goodness, atheists, this one you guys are terrible at, particularly when it comes to the Bible. Hey thinkers, welcome to Believing Thinkers, where we are loving God with all our minds. Today, I'm going to teach you how to examine evidence for your beliefs. When it comes to our beliefs about God, no matter what side of the debate you fall on, you want to do your best to examine the evidence fairly. Being able to examine evidence like a scholar or a detective is critical for all our thought formation. Now, before I go any further, some of you may be wondering, hey Sean, what crawled on your face and died? Yeah, the mustache is for some skits we do on our sister channel, Mixed Martial Apologetics. If you don't know why I have the mustache, you probably haven't been over there. If you like silly humor and apologetics, then be sure to go check our channel out. I think you'll love it. So, what are these tips for recognizing good evidence? Tip number 1, check the source. Now, for many of us, day to day, this can be difficult to do. And a lot of people, let's face it, just don't do it. They may see an article in the New York Times, Washington Post, or I don't know, on their favorite YouTube channel. They take the article or YouTube video to be credible and they don't fact check any of the information. Now, most of the time, the information may be credible, but if you don't check the source, you have no idea. Does this source come from an academic website, something that's trustworthy, or are they drawing the information from Wikipedia? Now, for you thinkers out there, let me give you a quick tip of advice. Wikipedia is not a trustworthy source. It's not an academic resource. From my experience, no college I've ever gone to, and I have 11 and a half years of school under my belt, will ever let me cite Wikipedia. And the reason why is you don't know who the author is. And recently it came out that some random guy had authored millions of these articles, and the guy had no credentials to be doing it. That's a problem. You see, academic sources require that the writer has some sort of degree in the relevant field, has been working in the field somehow, that they cite their sources and references. So this causes us to have trust in the work, but we can also check their work based on those references. So checking the source is a cornerstone, foundational part of the work we do in forming our beliefs, because if we don't check this, and the source isn't credible, we can't come to a conclusion rationally because we don't know where the information has come from. Tip number 2, check the context. Oh my goodness. Once again, atheists, what's going on here, guys? I mean, really, you guys have a terrible habit of quoting Bible verses out of context. It takes you no time at all to read the surrounding verses to see the context. Now, you might be right, but don't just take somebody else's word for it because they said it on their YouTube channel. Check the surrounding context. Read what the article, watch the video, see whatever the person is saying in its entire context. Take this piece of information as part of a whole. If you quote it or cite it or reference it out of context, you're probably going to end up straw-manning your opponent, or you're going to end up misrepresenting the evidence. You're going to come to a false conclusion. You're going to form a belief based on bad evidence. We don't want to do that. When we form our beliefs, we want to have the best, well-justified beliefs we possibly can. Yes, it takes work, but is it worth it when we're talking about God? Tip number 3, consider the degree of certainty. Now this is important. While we cannot have absolute certainty about much of anything, we can have reasonable certainty or reasonable beliefs based on different pieces of evidence, depending on what that evidence is, and we'll talk about that in another video. All the different things that count as evidence, how to weigh evidence more. But in this preliminary study, what we want to understand is, when we look at a piece of evidence, how certain is this thing? In other words, if somebody says, they make some claim about how scientists have discovered that God doesn't exist, go check the source, see it for yourself, read the article in context, and try to decide how certain is this piece of evidence. Very often, scientific evidence is talked about as if it's certain, it's been settled, true, it just is, it's been proven, and then you read the source and find out this is a hypothesis. There's no proof. There's no certainty. It's a best guess. They're still working on it. The scientist who's written the paper is saying they are indeterminate. They're waiting. In other words, it would be a sort of prima facie justification. So they're saying, at first glance of the evidence, we believe it to be this, but we need to do more studies. So be sure if somebody gives you a piece of evidence to check it in its context, right? Make sure you know where it's coming from, and then look at the degree of certainty. How certain is this person about it? Again, certain beliefs have a sort of certainty about them. In other words, because they're just self-evident. Certain things we can just know. Mathematical truths, certain truths of logic, they're just self-evident. But most of the things require a probabilistic sort of reasoning. So make sure you understand how certain this piece of evidence is. Tip number 4, corroborate the evidence. Is this evidence really fringe evidence? Are there any other reputable sources that are in agreement with this piece of evidence? Now, this fourth piece, while important, is only going to be functional in terms of all of the other pieces of advice I've given you today. All these tools are going to help you when it comes to forming a belief about God. In other words, somebody makes a claim. Science has proven God doesn't exist. Okay, first thing I'm going to do, check the source. Where is this coming from? Oh, turns out it's a Reddit post. Well, what is the Reddit post citing? Oh, it's just an opinion? Maybe there's some credence behind it. Maybe the author is citing some academic paper. I don't just go, oh, they cited an academic paper, great, then I should believe this. I'm going to go check out the academic paper. Next, I want to see, did they quote this thing in its context? So I'm going to read the academic paper, then check it to make sure it's credible, and lastly, corroborate it. What is this one scientist out of all of the scientists fringe? In other words, does everyone else disagree? I hate to say it, but let's take the example of Richard Carrier. There are atheist scholars all over the world that agree that Jesus Christ really existed. Carrier and a couple of his buddies are very fringe when it comes to this. Moreover, they don't have the credentials in the field. Now, you may say, well, that sounds like a genetic fallacy, Sean. Fair enough, so I won't hold that against him. But what I can say is inductively, he doesn't have the experience that those other people have. So in other words, probabilistically, how likely is it that he's correct? Well, I would need to look at his sources, what is he citing, and examine all of these different things in the light of his claim. Let me say that no one has a monopoly on truth. So if you have 100 scholars and one scholar believes X and the 99 believe Y, that doesn't make the 99 correct. Probabilistically, which one, if I had to make a guess, I would lean towards the 99 until I have an opportunity to examine all the evidence. If all the evidence points towards this guy, the one guy over here, I'm going to go with him. But if I don't have time and I have to make an inductive inference, then I'm going to tend to lean towards the 99. But again, don't be in a rush. You guys can be a priest up and do this. Some theologian says X, another one says Y. You want to determine which one is correct? Use these steps, guys. Now I have a fifth tip for you guys here. This comes from Roderick Chisholm. If you don't have enough evidence for or against a belief, just say, you know what, I'm not going to believe the negation or the affirmation of this until I have used these tips to examine all of the evidence in order to form a well-founded belief. Take your time. You don't need to have an opinion on this thing right away. That's the whole point of this last technique. The final one is suspend belief. Don't be in a rush. For more on this topic, be sure to check out the Critical Thinking Toolkit. I'll put a link down in the description below. All right, so I hope this has been helpful. Listen, we love you guys as always. Make sure you click that subscribe button, ring the bell to turn on notifications, and we will see you next time. Take care, and God bless. I got a mustache, and you ain't got one.